This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter, more dangerous, something that rarely looks dramatic until it's too late. Because what's failing here is not authority, not ideology, not even control of the streets. What's failing is circulation. The system you are watching was designed to survive outrage. It was not designed to survive interruption. Not when the interruptions reach the places where food arrives, fuel moves, and money turns into loyalty. And right now, those places are no longer behaving as expected. You are being shown images that look chaotic, crowds, smoke, noise. But the real story is invisible. It's mathematical. It's logistical. It's happening far from microphones. If you stay with me, you'll see why this kind of failure doesn't reverse. It only spreads. This matters beyond borders, beyond tonight. And if you think this is familiar, that's exactly the problem. Stay with me. What actually controls this system is not law, not force, not even fear. It's flow. Flow of fuel, flow of food, flow of components that never make the news because they're supposed to move silently, endlessly, without interruption. For decades, power here didn't depend on persuasion. It depended on predictability, on the assumption that ships dock, valves open, money clears, and payroll arrives on time. That assumption is now unstable. Not because people are angry. Anger is manageable. Anger burns out. What isn't manageable is when the system's own workers stop behaving like cogs and start behaving like decision makers. At that point, authority doesn't collapse. It drains. You can deploy forces to streets. You cannot order a crane to move if the operator refuses. You cannot command oil to flow if the valve stays shut. This is where modern power becomes fragile. Not at the top, but at the nodes. And once nodes fail, the map changes. Because the question stops being who rules and becomes what still works. And that question is spreading. For years, this shift happened quietly. No announcements, no vote, no dramatic takeover. Just small adjustments that felt reasonable at the time. Ports became automated. Energy systems became centralized. Supply chains became optimized for efficiency, not resilience. Before, disruption meant delay. Now, disruption means paralysis. Before, control meant territory. Now, control means timing. And that change didn't arrive overnight. It arrived slowly enough to feel normal. A missed shipment here, a delayed payment there, a workforce stretched thinner, paid later, blamed quietly, until temporary became permanent. This is the danger of gradual change. Your brain adapts. Institutions adapt. Systems don't. They become brittle. So when pressure finally arrives, it doesn't bend the structure. It snaps it. And what looks like sudden chaos is actually long-planned fragility finally being exposed. That's why this moment feels fast, but isn't. Because this didn't start when people flooded the streets. It started years ago when efficiency replaced redundancy. And once a system is optimized this tightly, it has only one failure mode: total interruption. And that interruption has already begun. Here is where the abstraction becomes physical. Because when circulation fails, it doesn't announce itself with ideology. It shows up as stillness. Ships that don't dock, cranes that don't move, valves that stay closed longer than planned. You're seeing images of strategic facilities no longer operating as infrastructure, but as leverage. Not sabotaged, not destroyed, simply unavailable. This isn't chaos. It's selective silence. The ports, the refineries, the places designed to never stop. When workers in those locations stop performing routine actions, the system doesn't register it as protest. It registers it as error, and errors cascade. Imports stall, Exports freeze. Maintenance parts don't arrive. Fuel allocation becomes triage. This is not the story of crowds. This is the story of a supply chain discovering it has a human veto built into every critical step. If you're watching this thinking it looks dramatic, that's understandable. But the drama is the distraction, because systems don't fall when they're attacked. They fall when they can no longer be trusted to function tomorrow. And right now, tomorrow is no longer guaranteed. Stay with me. Here's the part most coverage misses. This system was never held together by belief. It was held together by payroll. Money flowed outward from energy and trade, back inward through security, logistics, enforcement, a closed loop. As long as revenue moved, loyalty stayed purchasable. But when choke points freeze, the damage doesn't distribute evenly. It concentrates. The center absorbs shock last. The edges absorb it first. Security units wait longer to be paid. Contractors start rationing fuel. Maintenance is postponed. Orders become suggestions. And suddenly, obedience costs more than defiance. This is how power quietly inverts. The people who benefit longest are those closest to the flow. The people who break first are those asked to enforce order without compensation. That's why disruption here doesn't need leadership. It doesn't need coordination. It only needs time. Because every hour a port stays inactive, every valve stays closed, the math shifts. Not emotionally, structurally. And once loyalty becomes conditional, force becomes expensive. And once force becomes expensive, systems hesitate. That hesitation is visible now, not in speeches, in delays. And delays are how collapse begins, because the system is now paying more to stand still than it can afford to move. And that imbalance is accelerating. Now it speeds up, not because anyone planned it, because systems under strain lose their margins. Payments miss cycles. Fuel allocations shrink. Maintenance windows close. Small failures stack. A unit waits. Another hesitates. Another simply doesn't show up. Orders travel slower than rumors. Authority lags behind reality. You can see it in the footage, but you can hear it in the silence. Facilities still standing, machines still intact, but no one fully in charge. This is the dangerous phase, because nothing has collapsed yet, which means everyone is still pretending it won't. That pretense burns time. Time the system no longer has. Every hour without flow increases cost. Every delay multiplies risk. And here's the problem. There is no emergency switch for circulation, no override for trust. Once hesitation spreads, it doesn't reverse on command. It metastasizes. This is when allies pause. Markets react, and internal actors begin planning for after. Not rebellion, survival. And when enough people quietly plan for after, the present becomes ungovernable. This is the point of no announcement. The moment where the system hasn't fallen yet, but no longer expects to stand. This is where you enter the story. Not as an observer, as a variable. Because when circulation fails, it doesn't collapse evenly. It lands on households first. You feel it as uncertainty before you feel it as loss. Delayed deliveries, unavailable medicine, fuel limits explained as temporary. You are told to wait, to be patient, to trust that systems still work, but patience is a luxury that depends on timing. And timing is exactly what's breaking. When logistics stall, daily life becomes negotiation. Not with markets. With absence, you adjust routines, you stockpile quietly, you listen more closely to rumors than announcements. That's how people behave when they sense a system slipping, long before anyone admits it. This isn't panic yet. It's adaptation. And adaptation is dangerous for power because it means people are learning to function without permission. If you're still watching, it's because part of you recognizes this pattern. You've seen it somewhere before or felt it. And the reason this matters now is simple. Once enough people adapt, Restoring normal no longer restores control. Stay with me, because what happens next doesn't stay internal. This is the moment it stops being local, because circulation doesn't belong to one country. It threads outward. Routes that once felt permanent become conditional. Ships wait. Insurance recalculates. Markets don't ask why. They adjust. Alliances built on reliability start to wobble. Not publicly. Privately, partners don't issue statements. They pause commitments. They reroute quietly. They prepare alternatives that don't require explanation. This is how geopolitical trust erodes. Not with betrayal, with silence. When a critical corridor becomes unpredictable, everything downstream recalibrates. Energy pricing, transport timelines, strategic planning. No one declares a crisis. They simply stop assuming continuity. And once continuity is questioned, leverage shifts. Because systems that depended on this flow were never designed with redundancy. They were designed with confidence. Confidence is faster than caution, but it collapses faster too. So while attention stays fixed on internal tension, something else is happening off camera. Maps are being redrawn without announcements. Dependencies are being reassessed without permission. And this is the danger of choke point failure. You don't lose control all at once. You lose relevance. And relevance once lost is very difficult to recover, especially when others have already moved on. From here, there are only 3 directions this kind of system ever takes. The first is adjustment. Flow partially resumes, new agreements are made. Costs rise, but control is preserved. Not because trust returns, but because enough functionality is restored to buy time. This path requires coordination, resources, and credibility all at once. The second is erosion. Nothing breaks decisively, but nothing fully works again. Delays become permanent, exceptions become policy. Power continues to exist, but thinner, more reactive, more expensive. This is the longest path, and often the most destabilizing, because erosion feels survivable until it isn't. The third path is rupture. Not a single event, a sequence, where one choke point failure triggers another. Revenue collapses faster than authority can adapt. And decisions shift from governance to damage control. No announcement marks this moment. No speech defines it. It's recognized later, in hindsight, when everyone agrees the system crossed a line they didn't notice at the time. Right now, all 3 paths are still technically possible. That's what makes this moment dangerous, because acceleration doesn't wait for clarity. It feeds on hesitation, and hesitation is everywhere. What makes this moment different is not how loud it is, it's how quiet the failure has become. Systems don't warn you when they stop believing in themselves. They just stop planning for recovery. That's where we are now. Not at collapse, not at resolution, but at the point where restoration is no longer the default assumption. And that should unsettle you, because the most dangerous phase of any systemic failure is the one where everything still looks intact. Ports still standing, facilities still lit, institutions still issuing statements. But internally, decisions have shifted from how do we fix this to what survives after this. That shift doesn't reverse easily. If you're looking for reassurance, there isn't any here. Because reassurance only exists when systems still control time. And time is exactly what's slipping. What happens next won't be announced. It won't trend immediately. And it won't resolve cleanly. But the signals are already visible if you know where to look. That's why staying with this story matters. Not for answers, for awareness. Because the next phase of this failure won't look dramatic. It will look administrative, logistical, routine. And by the time it's obvious, it won't be reversible. If you want to understand what comes next, how these failures propagate, where the next choke points are, and why this pattern is repeating globally, stay with me. Because this system isn't the last one under pressure. It's just the one revealing the pattern first.